Hi everyone, today we're going to paint this bird of paradise flower, otherwise known as a Strelizia. Supplies for today: I've got a pencil and eraser. I've got two brushes, a size 00 for my detail work and a size 8 round brush. I've got tissue paper, water and my studio palette of colors. Today I'm going to be using Bao Academy watercolor paper. This is supposed to be Bao student grade of paper, whereas the professional grade paper is called the artist's watercolor paper. I find that there's really not too much difference between the two as far as quality is concerned. They're both 100% cotton and 300 GSM or £140. The Academy is cheaper in price, and I really don't mind painting on it whatsoever. I find it a very good quality brand of paper. I'm going to be working on the square block today, which is 260 by 260 millimeter. As I said, it is cold press paper. I'm going to start with my pencil sketch already on the page. You can find the link to the free downloadable and traceable reference sketch to this in the link in the description box below. I am going to erase my pencil lines a little bit, just so that they are less evident in my final sketch. I'm going to take a kneaded eraser and I'm just going to pass it over the sketch over the darker areas of the graphite. In this first layer, I need to decide what colors I'm happy to blend into each other and which ones I want to keep separate. I don't want the orange and the green of the leaves to blend into each other. I'd like them to stay separate. But there's a whole rainbow of colors in this area here, which also then has a soft yellow in this area onto this part of the green, that I don't mind any of this blending into each other. But I'd like to keep the bluish purple bits separate as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start up with the orange yellow area here, and then I'm going to work into this one here where I'm not going to mind them blending into each other. I'm going to use my palette of 18 colors, my new studio palette. I will put the link to me making up this palette and my color choices and my reasoning behind my color choices. There's a whole video on that one, and I will also put that link in the description box below if you would like to have a look at that one. I'm going to spray my colors just to activate them. So I'm going to start with the very light yellow orange that I can see in this part of the flower, and I'll worry about the darker bits a little bit later. So for that, I think I'm going to do a mix of Hansa Yellow Light and Pyrrol Scarlet. I think I want it a bit yellower than that, so I'm going to add some more of the yellow. Yeah, I'm happy with that. So I'm working wet on dry because the color that I'm dropping in is extremely diluted. So it's not really necessary for me to put water down first. Then it's quite yellowy underneath before I get to the pinkish red section, so I'm just going to add a bit of yellow. Put that there. It's a little bit too wet for me to come and do some darker orange in here just at the moment, so I will move on and then come back to that. So in this area here, I think I'm going to go straight to Alizarin Crimson. It's very watery in my palette there, which is fine. That's why I can dip straight into it and not have to mix it first. I'm going to carry that color down into this area. Then it goes a little bit orange. So I can just pick up, maybe I'll just add in the new Gamboge here. And then there's quite a deep purple. I think I'm going to do Alizarin Crimson. And what shall I add? I think I'll add some French Ultramarine. I am concerned about this edge drying before I get there. I just want to wet it so that I don't get a hard edge. Okay, that just gives me a bit of time to mix colors as I go. Then there's quite a bit of yellow in this area. I'll get Hansa light. Put that in. Then we want a limeish green in this area. I'm going to stick with the Hansa light and drop the slightest bit of indigo. Indigo is so intense. There's such a good chance that I'm going to make it too green. Let's start with that. And then we need a more intense green. So I'm going to do Hansa light with French Ultramarine. And then I'll add more of the blue to make it more green. I'm going to do this yellow join now. And then go back to the lime green and then the darker green. I'm getting a bit of a hard edge here where the water is running back and meeting the color. So I'm just going to dab off my brush, tap it off, and then just try and blend here so that I don't end up with a hard line. I'm going to let that dry completely now before I do anything further. That is now dry, so I'm going to put the base layer on everything else now. For the green leaf, I'm going to do a very light green. I'm going to do a mixture of Hansa Yellow Light and French Ultramarine. I'll just work into the place I've got here, so there might be a bit of mixing, but that's fine. I want it really light, so I'm going to water it down and then drop it in over the whole leaf. What I think I'm going to do in this layer is this central vein is very, very light. I'm going to try and lift it. So I'm going to rinse off my brush and dab it off that it is almost dry. And then I'm going to run it up that central vein, and that will lift the color in the middle. I might have to keep on repeating it just to get the pigment off my brush and clean it again. Sometimes the color runs back into the area that you've lifted because there's still quite a lot of water on the page. You just got to keep an eye on it. If you need to go back and repeat it because the area is filling in, you can. Now I'm going to do this area here, which is purple, but it is also very, very blue. So I think I'm going to use a base of Phthalo blue and then add into it Quinacridone Rose to get my purple. I'll work in this area again. It's very pink. I've gone too far to the pink side. Let me add more blue. So I think that's good. I'm going to do it as a very watery mix. So what I've mixed on my palette is quite intense. So I'm almost going to rinse off my brush and not add anything to it. Put that down and see what it looks like, and then rather add to it. I see there's sort of yellowy reddish here. I can try and add that in this layer. What I might do is just drop in a little bit of this more intense color just up here where there is the shadow area. That might help me out in my next layer. I'll also do it along the bottom here. And also I might go a little bit more purple. It's looking quite blue. So I'll come down here where I had a bit more of the pinkish color and just drop some of that in here for some variation. Alright, let's see what adding some of the yellow in will do in this layer. And then down here I can add in some of that light yellow base color. Alright, I'm going to let that all dry. That is all completely dry now, and I have replaced my water. I'm going to make up a deeper orange color now to start in this area. My deepest apologies. For reasons which I have utterly no idea, my camera started recording and then just stopped itself for the rest of this layer. So to just explain what I did over that layer, I mixed up a darker and more intense orange color, which you can see that I used and I put in the veins of the orange flower. I put it down along the lines of the veins of the flower, wet on dry, and then I used a clean damp brush to blend those darker lines outwards so that they didn't blend out too far. Then I mixed up a more intense red color and did the same thing in that little triangle that you can see at the bottom that is intensely red, plus a little bit up the left hand side of that red section, wet on dry, and blended it outwards. And I also intensified the orange along the top curve of the leaf that goes out to the side, put that down wet on dry, and blended it downwards as well. I then left it to dry completely, and we'll pick up on the next layer. Alright, that's completely dry. I'm going to work on this purplish blue area now. I'm going to work wet in wet, so I'm going to wet the area first with clean water. Using the bigger size 8 brush, I'm going to start from the shadow side and put in this darkest blue purple that I've got prepared. I'll also put it on the bottom. Then I'll tend more towards the purple side here, just pick up some of that warmer color. I'm going to avoid putting it here and also here, which is the highlight area. Maybe I'll just put some along the edge here and along the very top. But now I'm going to just encourage blending, but try and preserve this highlight area. And the same down here. Just add a little bit of that over here. And then I'm going to blend. With my detail brush now, I might just add a little bit here and here. I'm going to add some indigo to here, just to drop in on the darkest shadow area in here, just to try and increase my contrast. Because the consistency is so thick, it's not blending at all, and also the paper is drying, so I'm just going to encourage a bit of blending here. I could also do this in an additional layer if I want to. Yeah, I might come in and add more of that indigo because I think it's giving a nice contrast. But if I start playing around with it, I run the risk of lifting the color that's underneath when trying to blend. So I'd rather just leave it. What I'm going to do in this area here is try and get some of those lines that we can see. I think what I'm going to do is get a very light purple, but I really don't want too much contrast here. So I'm really going to water it down, something like that, and then just do some of the lines that kind of start in this area, in the purple area. They don't really run into the orange area. I'll start one guide over here. Add a couple extra. I like to go sort of halfway. It helps me keep my line. And then I'll go in between. And I'll just add on top. Because I've got so much water here, this is going to dry a lot lighter. So I don't even know if these lines will be visible at all once it's dry, but I can't go lighter if I've gone too dark. So I'd rather err on the side of caution and then redo this again if I need to. Alright, I'm going to let that dry. My painting is completely dry now, and now I'm going to work on the leaf. With the leaf, I'm going to work on the veins, and I'm going to do a dark line at the beginning of each vein and then use water to grade the color outwards. I'm also going to work on every second vein just so that the one doesn't then bleed into the next one. I'd like to keep them separate. I'm going to mix up my green first. I'm going to use a mix of Hansa Yellow Light and French Ultramarine. This layer is going to be a slightly thicker consistency because it is the second layer, and I also want to make sure that I mix up enough to be able to do the whole leaf. I'm going to work with my smaller brush, so I'm just tapping off as much of this pigment as I can so that I can use it again. I'm also going to turn my page now because I'm going to do the darker color at the join of the vein and then blend it outwards, and it's easier for me to do that if I work from left to right. So I will start on this half first because that's the part that is the furthest away from me. Maybe I'll do a bit this side and then a bit this side and then move from left to right. I'll use my small brush and put a dark line down there first, wet on dry. Grab a bit of water and then blend it outwards. You see, that's the next vein, so that's why I wouldn't work there next. Otherwise, the dark color that I put here would then bleed upwards. I'm just going to tap in a bit more here because it has diluted out with the water. I'm going to go and do the same thing on the other side. Then I will skip that one and go here. And you want to retain this lighter area as you approach the junction to the next veins. Otherwise, you're not going to get the contrast when you come and fill in every second one. French Ultramarine that I've used to make this green mix is a granulating color. That means that the particles inside the paint that are used to make it are bigger than in most other paints, and as a result of that, the particles of the blue separate from anything else that you mix it with, and you can see that happening on the palette here. It also then happens on the painting itself. It makes a not very smooth green when you are putting it down on the paper. I actually find that desirable when I'm doing things like leaves because I'd like to get a bit of texture, and the French Ultramarine actually helps do that because you don't get a completely even green when it goes down. Some people find the granulating nature of French Ultramarine to be frustrating if you're not looking for a granulating effect when you put it down, and if that's the case, then I would suggest using a different blue to make the green if the granulation is something that you don't want. I'm getting to bigger areas now, and this paper seems to be drying very quickly, and I don't want to get hard lines. I can see there's potentially a hard line there. So now I am considering maybe just working a little bit wet and wet, just so that I've got a bit more time to spread that color. But I don't want too much water because I don't want that green mix blending or moving all the way to the next vein. So I'm just helping myself and giving myself a bit more time here, putting some water down first. But hopefully it's not so much that the green is going to bleed far. So that's what I was looking for, that I'm just not getting a hard edge at the edge of the green that I'm laying down. But because I put the water down there, and this green on the edge here blends out quite a lot more than if I hadn't. So I've just got to add in a bit more here until I get the depth of color that I'm looking for. I'm not quite sure what I want to do about the central vein. I know that it is lighter, but maybe, I don't know if if it's too dry, but I'm just going to go back and just try and soften this area where it meets the center and just see. It's quite dry. The top is nearly ready to work on. I'm just going to leave this 1 minute just so that I don't put my hand in the wet area, and then I'll come back and do the second veins. Right, that's dry now. I'm now going to repeat the same thing again with the every second vein. I am just going to put a thin line of darker green in here for the bit of the stalk that goes behind this main front section. Now that the main body of the leaf is dry, I'm finding the color a little bit insipid and light. I can see on the picture it is a lot darker and more vibrant than what I've got here. So I'm going to take the opportunity to do a glaze of a darker color over the whole leaf. In doing that, I will still retain the contrast if I glaze the whole thing. And then I'm also going to use the opportunity to drop a little bit of color down the central vein at the same time. So I'm going to work wet and wet. I'm going to wet the whole leaf and then just take it from there. So I'm going to just water down and mix the color that's already on my palette. Start with that. I'm still going to avoid the center vein for now. I'm going to start on the outside. And then I'm just going to encourage this with clean water to blend towards the center. So now let me think of that central vein. I'm going to make sure it's wet. Color can bleed into it that I've already put down, but it will be light color. And I can see there's a bit of the sort of orangey color down the center, so I'm going to grab some of that. Just dot that here and there. Maybe I'll get a spot of yellow ochre. I think adding in this extra green now is pushing me a lot closer to what I was looking for in the first place. What I'm also going to do, because purple is the complementary color to orange, it's therefore a good color to use as a shadow color, I'm going to put in a dark shadow line again on those darkest areas that I've already put the dark orange down. So I think I'm going to remember this small brush doesn't put down much water at all. I'm going to use the slightly bigger brush, but I don't want to make it too wet, even if I just let it dry for a little bit. So I'll pick up some of the purple that is there, and I'm dropping it in quite concentrated and then just up along that top line. I'll blend it a bit down here. And then the same over here. I'm going to add in a bit of orange along these areas here. And I think I can work in this part of the stalk now. The color that I had there, I'm going to lighten it a little with yellow, just because it is a slightly lighter green. Let me put that down and then decide. I'm going to let this dry a bit. I want to do a few lines along the stalk just like I did these over here, but if I do it at the moment it's going to spread entirely. I'd like a little bit of blending like we had here, but not too much, so I'm just going to wait a minute or so. Maybe what I'll do whilst I wait is I'm going to put a few texture lines on the purple part. I'm going to get a light mix. I don't want dark lines at all. I'm going to prepare a green in the meantime. I'm not going to need very much at all, but I'd like it to be a thicker consistency. Right, let's see how we're doing here. Still a bit wet. I'll put a couple down. It's dry at the bottom, so you can see the lines are staying more in place at the bottom. I think that's enough to suggest the texture. I've lost some of my vein lines here. I'm just going to go back and just put them back in again. I'm just having a look if it needs anything else. I think maybe down here at the very underneath of this red here, maybe we could have a little bit of shadow. I don't want to overwork this painting, but I'm just having a look at if there's anything extra that I think it needs just in these final stages. So I think I'm going to add a bit of shadow just on the right hand side here. Yeah, I'm happy with that. And I'm just wondering if we should have some in here. I think I will. And now I think I'm willing to call it a day. And there's the final painting. Thank you so much for joining me today. Until next time, bye for now.